Everyone, so today we are going to discuss a topic which is called as averages. So let's try and understand the things that are related to average, and let's first try and understand how do we calculate the average. So starting with the idea, so let's suppose we have been given a very simple and straightforward example. Suppose there is a monthly rainfall data for the city Colombo in 2012. Every month how much it is raining, basically that is given, and let's say if they ask us to calculate what is the average rainfall that is happening for the entire 1 year. So obviously what we will do, we'll add all the numbers and we'll divide by 12. That will give us the average rainfall for the entire year. So the formula for average is number of sum of all the values divided by number of values. That is the formula for average. Now this simple average is also called by a different name, which is also called as arithmetic mean. So there are three types of means. In the meantime, we'll also see in the last half of the topic how do we calculate the other two means, that is geometric mean and harmonic mean. But meanwhile, this is just for your reference. So sum of all the values divided by number of values, that gives you the average value, which is if you add all the numbers, they are very easy to understand, also not very difficult. So when you add them, the total turns out to be 3000, and when you divide by 12, you get the answer to be 250 millimeters. So 3000 divided by 12 gets you 250 millimeters. So that is the simple calculation. Now there is one more method that we are going to use, and that method is something which is called as method of assumed mean. Now what is this method of assumed mean? Let's try and understand in detail. So there are three steps that you need to follow. Step number one is you can assume the value of the average. So as the name only suggests, assumed mean, which means you are free to assume any value as the average. But there is only one restriction that you will have to follow, and that restriction is whatever value that you are assuming, it has to be between the range, that is your smallest number and your largest number. It should be between these numbers only. So for example, here if you see, our largest number is 600 and our smallest number is 100. So whatever we are assuming has to be between these numbers only. We cannot assume less than 100, we cannot assume more than 600. So that is also you need to remember. So let's see what they are assuming. So just as a reference, they are assuming 200 as the average. Though we know from the previous calculation that 250 is the correct answer, but we'll see how do we get this 250 from this 200. So that was the first step, assume the value of the average. The second step is you have to take individual deviation of all the values with respect to the assumed value. Now what do I mean by that? So let's say if you observe, actually for January ka data, it is only 130 millimeter rainfall that is happening, whereas we have assumed that it is flat 200 millimeter that is happening every time. So that means in January there is actually a deficit of 70 millimeter than whatever we have assumed. So we have assumed 200, but the actual data is 130. So there is a difference of 70. So that will be minus 70, and that is called as the deviation. Similarly, if you think for February, the data is 150, actual data, we have assumed 200, so the deviation will be minus 50. So February's number is 50 less than what we have assumed. That is what it denotes. Now similarly, you will also observe one more thing, that for some numbers that are more than 200, the deviation will be positive, and for some numbers it will be negative, that are less than 200. So when we do that, you get that all these deviations, as we discussed, some positive, some negative, depending on what you assume, depending on what you have as the numbers also. Now the third and the last step is most important, that you have to take average of all these numbers. So when you take average of all these numbers, what you will be doing is obviously again adding all the numbers and dividing by 12. And this is where your calculation gets reduced right now, because when you add them, there is a high chance that some of the positive and negative numbers will cancel out each other, and that is what is going to happen also. So this 20 out, this minus 120 plus 20 out, this minus 170 plus 170 out. Now we are left with plus 750, 350 plus 400, and minus 150, minus 50 and minus 100. That gives you 600 as the total. and to take the average, what we will do is we will divide by 12. So when you divide 600 by 12, you get 50, and comes the last part. Whatever is this last calculation that you do, if it comes out to be positive, then you are supposed to add in the assumed value, and if this answer is negative, then you are supposed to subtract from the assumed value. So that is what you need to remember. So because we have gotten plus 50, so what we are going to do is we are gonna add it in the number. So that gives you answer as 250, the same old answer that we have also gotten earlier. So that is the thing you need to remember, that this method can work for any number that you assume if you follow it correctly. So remember this. So whenever the calculation becomes difficult in averages, we are going to use this again and again and again, which is the concept of assumed mean basically. Now coming to that note, which probably you would know, but still you need to remember that whatever is the average is always between the numbers. It cannot cross the numbers, it cannot cross the range basically. So that is one point also that you can remember. Now after this, what we need to understand that how average behaves in certain scenarios. So there are 4 scenarios that we need to understand, and the scenarios are very, very simple. What we will try to do is we'll try to connect that with questions that we solve eventually. So this table is very, very important. So you'll see that there are 2 columns. One is more than the current average and one is less than the current average, and there are a couple of rows also, which is addition of a value and deletion of a value basically. Now what happens really is, when you, let's say, add any value which is more than the current average, what happens is your average increases, and when you add a value which is less than current average, your average decreases. Similarly, reverse will happen. When you subtract a value which is more than current average, your average will decrease, and when you subtract a value which is less than the current average, the average will increase. How all of this happens, we will again come back to this when we do questions. But do keep in mind, this table will act as a good checkpoint for your answers, whether you have done it correctly or incorrectly. So that is the whole benefit out of that. Now moving on, the next idea is something called as weighted average, which they have explained with the help of a question straight away. So let's take a hypothetical example, that there is a student who is going to score, let's say, 60% in maths, 70% in science and 80% in languages, and then we are asked to calculate his average marks. Normally what we will do is we'll add all 3 and then divide by 3, which gives you the answer as 70%. But this thought process is slightly incorrect, because we are not dealing with normal numbers, we are dealing with percentage numbers. Now what is the difference here is, this entire thing would have been right if they would have said that the total marks for all the subjects is same or equal, or the total marks for all the subject is out of 100. Then this process is right. But if you read that question from your handout one more time, you will realize that nowhere this is mentioned. So that is the problem, we cannot do this. Now what are the repercussions of that? So assuming, now here what we are assuming, when we do this, we are actually assuming that total marks for all the subjects are same, which may not be the case actually. So how do we tackle this? So obviously what we can do is we can create another scenario where we assume that the total marks for every subject is different. Let's see what happens then. So suppose, imagine that the total marks are different for different subjects. For example, maths total marks are 200 for the entire subject, and out of that 200 this guy is getting 60%, and then science is out of 300, out of that this guy is getting 70%, and languages is out of 500, and from that this guy is getting 80%. So what we'll have to do is we'll have to first calculate all the marks for this student, which is 60% of 200, which will be 120, then 70% of 300, which is 210, and 80% of 500, which is going to be 400. And now to calculate the total marks, or the rather average percentage marks, we'll have to add all the marks, divide by the total marks, which gives you all of this, and to convert into percentage we'll have to multiply by 100. This entire thing gives you the answer as 73%, which is different than the 70% earlier answer that we have gotten. So be very, very careful when we are dealing with percentages. We simply cannot add the numbers. We'll have to make sure to add the percentage, the data point should be given, that is the total marks for all the subject is same or equal. Should have been mentioned, otherwise we cannot do this. So remember very carefully in this particular idea. Now coming back to the idea that what exactly is weighted average. So we'll do a very simple question which says there is a 3 kilos of tea powder which is costing 10 rupees per kilo and is mixed with 2 kilos of tea powder which is costing 25 rupees per kilo, and what is the average price of the resulting mixture. So weighted average is what basically you'll have to calculate your total cost, total investment divided by total quantity that you have. So for example, one variety you have is 10 rupees per kilo and you are taking 3 kilos of that. So when you buy this, you will be investing 30 rupees. 10 rupees per kilo, 3 kilos ka 30 rupees, and 25 rupees per kilo, 2 kilos ka 50 rupees. When you add all of them, you get 80 rupees as your investment, and in this 80 rupees, what you have done is you have gotten 5 kilos worth of mixture, 3 kilos of one variety and 2 kilos of other variety. Both of them if you add, you get 5 kilos of the mixture. So 80 divided by 5, you get 16 rupees as your average price. So this method of multiplying weights with the prices, in a way you can call it as weighted average basically. So and you can do this for all, I mean for more than 2 varieties also. If you're mixing 3 varieties, 4 varieties, 5 varieties, doesn't matter. You keep doing this, you'll keep getting the similar kind of answer. So the structure is same. Now of course what we can improvise in this is, if the numbers are bad, we can have a slightly different thought process or different approach to tackle that, which we will see definitely when it comes to the question. Now these numbers were easy, so we are not looking there from that perspective. So I hope that is clear so far in terms of weighted average. Now let's move further. The next idea, as I said, that there are a couple of other means also. One is geometric and one is harmonic mean. Now what we are doing today is we are going to see them only from the point of view of solving the question. So you should know the formula, substitute the values and solve the question and get your answer type. The whole funda behind it we'll see later on in the numbers topic when we do the series of arithmetic progression, geometric progression and harmonic progression, because each one of them has one mean. So arithmetic progression has arithmetic mean, geometric progression has geometric mean, and harmonic progression has harmonic mean. But right now only from the solving perspective. So geometric mean, the formula is this: nth root of n1 into n2 into n3 into n4 and so on and so forth, where n1 n2 n3 are the numbers जिसका तुम्हें geometric mean find out करना है, तो उन सबको multiply करना पड़ेगा, and n is the total number of values, which is, let's say if you have 2 numbers you will take square root, if you have 3 numbers you will take cube root, if you have 4 numbers you will take fourth root, and so on and so forth basically. So let's see a very simple question also basis this. Hopefully you have taken this down. So the question is 10, 20, 30 का geometric mean. Formula we know, multiply all 3 numbers, so 10 into 20 into 30, and because 3 numbers, so we'll have to take cube root of that. So 6000 is the answer, and 6000 का cube root, now numbers should be good for the same reasons. Should realize 6000 जो है वो किसी का cube नहीं होता है, तो we'll have to readjust it as something like this, which is 6 into 1000. The reason being very simple, 1000 जो होता है वो 10 का cube होता है, so 1000 का अगर cube root ले लिया तो 10 बाहर आ जाएगा, and you will get 10 cube root of 6. Now cube root of 6 you cannot find out unless and until you have the calculator, but at least this much simplification is expected when you are solving these kinds of questions basically. So this is about geometric mean. Talking about harmonic mean, again a formula. So the formula is n upon 1 upon n1 plus 1 upon n2 plus 1 upon n3 and so on and so forth. Similar philosophy, n1, n2, n3 are the numbers जिसका आपको harmonic mean find out करना है, and n is the total number of values. So if let's say you have 2 numbers, n का value will be 2. You have 3 numbers, n का value will be 3, and so on so forth basically. So that is what you need to remember. तो ये हो गया तुम्हारा harmonic mean. Let's do a quick question. So 489 का harmonic mean निकालना है फटाफट. When we substitute in the formula, this is what we are going to get. Now you'll have to simplify. So we'll have to make sure all the denominators are equal, because until then we cannot add those fractions. So 489 का LCM, that becomes 72. So to make it 72, I mean all three numbers, the first number has to be multiplied with 18 because 18 4 is 72. So this one has to be also multiplied with 18. The second one is supposed to be multiplied with 9. So this one is also supposed to be multiplied with 9. Then 9 is supposed to be multiplied with 8. So this one also supposed to be multiplied with 8. When we do this, what happens is सबका denominator हो जाएगा 72 and then we can simply add the numerators. So as you can see the numerators, 18 ones are 18, 9 ones are 9, 8 ones are 8. And then the common denominator 72 goes up and gets multiplied with 3, and these 18, 9, 8 gets added. It gives you 35 as the answer. So 72 3 is 216. 216 upon 35 is your final answer when you do the calculation. So at least again, as I said, the basic level of simplification is needed, which is what very important in such types of questions. So that is about harmonic mean. Now there is one more thing that you need to remember, so that there is a relation between all the three means. So obviously arithmetic mean is always going to be the highest among all three, followed by geometric mean, followed by harmonic mean. So arithmetic mean is greater than or equal to geometric mean, geometric mean is greater than or equal to harmonic mean. So that is one relation that you also need to remember. So these are the concepts that are related to averages. We'll see the questions right now in some time. So let's start with the questions now. Starting with the first one, which says the average age of the class consisting of 17 students and their teacher is 22 years, and if the teacher is 56 years old, then what is the average age of the students in the class? Now let's assume something. If you know the basic idea of average, then you can easily solve this question. So for example, we know the formula of average, which is average is sum of all the values divided by number of values, correct? Now imagine if you have given average, because they have said average is 22 and number of values, so 17 students and their teacher, so there are total 18 people, so that also you know. Now if you see the formula, if you just simply multiply these two numbers, what you end up getting is the sum of all the values. So we can do the same thing. 18 are the people, 17 students and their teacher, their average is 22. So when you multiply these two things, according to the formula, you should get the sum. So this is basically going to be sum of all the people's ages, including the teacher also. Now what they were saying is, teacher is 56 years old, and what is the average age of only the students in the class? So basically we are supposed to remove the teacher now, whereas in this sum, teacher is also included. So we just need to subtract his age from that sum. Now if you subtract his age from the sum, whatever is the sum that is left is only now for the students' ages. And to calculate the average, we'll have to divide by number of students, because the sum is now only for the students' ages. So when you do this calculation, you will get your answer as, I think, 20 is what you should be getting your answer. Now, this is your lengthy method. So if nothing comes to you, at least this much you should be able to figure out, this much you should be able to solve using the basic idea of averages. There is one more method also which you can think of, which you can use. Now let's try and understand that method. That is a very smarter method which reduces a lot of calculation. But to understand that method, what you will have to remember is one simple property, and that property is that if you add or subtract a value which is equivalent to the current average, then average doesn't change. I will repeat this one more time. If you add or subtract a value which is equal to the current average, then the current average doesn't change. It remains the same. Remember this property, very important. Now how do we use this? So here, if you remember the question now, or if you have read the question and you have understood the question, what is supposed to be done, that we are supposed to take the average of only the students in the class. So that means we are supposed to get rid of the teacher from the group. Now try and think about it. If the teacher would have also been only 22 years old, which is your current average, and if you remove that, obviously the average wouldn't have changed. It would have remained the same, which is 22 itself. बट इन रियलिटी ऐसा नहीं हो रहा है. द टीचर इज नॉट 22 years old, द टीचर इज ओनली 56 years old. So that means he must be carrying some extra age with himself when he was present in the group. So you have to figure out how much extra he is carrying with himself. So obviously 34 years of extra age that he is carrying with himself. Now what we need to do is, whatever is his 34 extra will be divided among all the 17 students equally. So that means every student must be getting 2 years of extra age because of the teacher, when teacher was with them in the same group. But right now what we are doing is we are removing the teacher. So that means his extra 34 also will removed. That means every student will also be reduced by 2 years. So now think of it, the entire student community is getting reduced by 2 years each. So obviously the average should also go down by 2 years, and the average becomes 20, which is answer option 1. Now imagine solving it with this approach, which can take a lot of time, versus this kind of solution, which is mostly logical, and that is what your lookout has to be in terms of learning these kinds of approaches, which makes your life tremendously simple and easy. So that is your first question. So answer is 20 basically. I hope you've gotten this. Moving on to the second one. The average marks scored by 43 students in a class of mathematics is 72, and the score of the student who is scoring only 9 marks is excluded. What is the average marks scored by the remaining student? Again, same philosophy. You know number of students, you know average. If you multiply both of them, you will get the sum. So same philosophy. 43 is the number of students, 72 is the average. If you multiply, you get सबके marks का sum you get. But उसमें से क्या करना है आप? एक बच्चा है जिसने सिर्फ 9 मार्क्स स्कोर किया, उसको निकाल देना है, उसको एक्सक्लूड करना है, तो उसके 9 मार्क्स हटा देते हैं. तो अगर उस बच्चे को हटा दिया तो अब ग्रुप में 42 बच्चे ही बच जाएंगे, एंड इन सबका सम भी है, बिकॉज वो 9 मार्क्स वाले बच्चे को हमने सब्ट्रैक्ट कर दिया है. तो all of this calculation will give you the answer, which I think is 73.5. Now again imagine there's a lot of complication when it comes to these kinds of calculations. Let's try and think from our perspective. So what was the situation? ये जो भी 9 मार्क्स वाला बच्चा है, हाइपोथेटिकली अगर उसने भी 72 स्कोर किया होता और अगर उसको ग्रुप से निकाल देते तो एवरेज वुड नॉट हैव चेंज्ड, एवरेज वुड हैव रिमेन्ड द सेम. बट इन रियलिटी ऐसा हो रहा है क्या? क्या उस बच्चे ने 72 स्कोर किया है क्या? तो ऑब्वियसली नहीं. उसने स्कोर कितना किया है? सिर्फ 9 मार्क्स स्कोर किया है. दैट मीन्स ही इज हैविंग अ डेफिसिट ऑफ 63 मार्क्स. एंड इसका ये डेफिसिट जो है 63 मार्क्स का, वो कौन शेयर कर रहा होगा? द रिमेनिंग 42 स्टूडेंट्स मस्ट बी शेयरिंग दैट डेफिसिट ऑफ 63 marks. And when you do that calculation, turns out every student is sharing 1.5 marks from their kitty to hide that deficit of 63 marks of that one student who have scored apparently very less compared to all the other remaining students. Now the moment we remove this 9 marks wala bachcha, the whatever 63 ka deficit also goes off, and the 1.5 that every student has contributed earlier for this deficit comes back to them. So obviously अगर हर एक बच्चे के पास 1.5 वापस आ गया तो एवरेज ऑब्वियसली कितना हो जाएगा? 73.5 हो जाएगा, which is answer option 4. And again look at the difference in the calculation. That has to be your motivation to learn this method ASAP, so that you get such benefits when you are solving such kind of questions using these kinds of philosophies. So this was our second question. Moving on to the third one. 12 kilos of tea powder costing 17 rupees per kilo, 18 kilos of tea powder costing 23 rupees per kilo, and 30 kilos of tea powder costing 19 rupees per kilo is mixed together, and what is the resultant price? So obviously weighted average is something that we need to use here, and if you use weighted average, this is what you will be doing also. Now comes the best part. What here we can do is we can reduce the calculation. Now how do we reduce the calculation? So let's use slightly different thought process to reduce the calculation. So if you remember, in the concept we have discussed one method called as method of assumed mean. We'll use that. So the prices that we are discussing are 17, 23 and 19 rupees. Now what we can do is, our range is 17 से लेके 23 तक. We can assume any number as the average. Okay. So what I'll do is, I'll assume one of the numbers only as the average. So let's say I'll assume 19 rupees as the average. Now once you have assumed the value, what do? We find out the deviation of all the values with respect to the assumed value. So 17 का 19 के साथ जो deviation है वो -2 हो जाएगा. 23 का जो है वो +4 हो जाएगा. एंड 19 का deviation 19 के साथ 0 हो जाएगा. So one more thing you should understand here, whenever you are assuming, try and assume one of the given numbers only, ताकि one calculation automatically becomes 0, the deviation will become 0. See, you would have assumed 20 also, but then what would have happened? 19 का 20 के साथ deviation आता +1, जो वापस unnecessarily थोड़ा सा calculation बढ़ा देता. So to make it more simpler, what we are going to do is, कोई भी जो दिया हुआ ही एक वैल्यू है उसी को assume कर लेना. That is the best way going forward. So let's do this calculation, simple calculation. 12 2s are 24 but -24, and 18 4s are 72 plus 72, and 19 zeros are 0 only, because we have assumed 19 only as the average price. And then 12 plus 18 is 30, 30 plus 30 becomes 60. So this becomes 48 by 60. If you reduce by 6 again, this becomes 8 by 10. If you further reduce, becomes 4 by 5, which further becomes 0.8 basically. So 0.8, we could have done this here only, 8 by 10, 0.8. So 0.8, and if you also remember, it is positive. So if it is positive, we are going to add in the assumed value. So 19 is what we had assumed. So 19 plus 0.8, you are going to get 19.8 as the average price. Now imagine this easy calculation versus if you are doing this original calculation and then getting 19.8, will be super difficult without the calculator, and you can make a lot of mistakes when it comes to calculation. So learn these easy methods which makes your life much easier basically. So that is the whole concern here. So that was our third question. Great, they have also assumed 19 only, which is the best part. The fourth one, the average age of 39 students in a class of 24, and the average increases by 1 when a new student joins the class. What is the age of that new student? We can obviously do this with equations. You have average, you have number of students. If you multiply them, you get the sum. The new guy coming in, we don't know his weight, his age, assuming it is X, and because of this new guy, now there are 40 students in a class, because earlier there were 39 students. Because of the new person X, there are now 40 people in the class, and the sum is this. When you divide, you get average, and because of this new guy, the average increases by 1. That is also said basically. So the new average becomes 25. When you solve this entire thing, you will get the answer as 64, which is answer option 2. One more shortcut. Let's assume you are solving this. This gets multiplied. So 25 into 40 is 1000, and then this 1000 X we want to find out. So this number goes on this side and gets subtracted. So this 39 into 24, what I am trying to do is, I am trying to judge the last digit. So 9 4s are 36. So last digit is going to be 6 for that number. 39 into 24. I don't know what is that number. Last digit is 6. 1000 में से we are subtracting something जिसका last digit 6 है. Obviously जो भी last digit है आंसर का वो 4 ही होना चाहिए. Only one option which is 4. Easy as that. But दिस इज इक्वेशन. लेट्स थिंक फ्रॉम आवर पर्सपेक्टिव. ये जो नया बच्चा आ रहा है इसकी वजह से एवरेज 1 से बढ़ गया. और एवरेज 1 से कब बढ़ गया? सी अंडरस्टैंड दिस. whoever is this new guy, if his actual age would have also been 24, then and if he has entered the group, the average wouldn't have changed. It would have remained 24 only. But because of him the average is changing, and not only it is changing, it is increasing by 1 for the entire group. So that means this whoever is this new person coming up, he should have minimum 24 तो होना ही चाहिए to keep the average same. But इसके आने की वजह से एवरेज बढ़ रहा है, मतलब ही मस्ट हैव सम एक्स्ट्रा पार्ट जिसकी वजह से वो एवरेज बढ़ रहा है. एंड इसके आने की वजह से कितने लोग होने वाले हैं? 40 लोग होने वाले हैं. एंड सबका एवरेज 1-1 से बढ़ रहा है ग्रुप का, यानी सबके पास 1-1 जाना चाहिए एक्स्ट्रा, तो ही ग्रुप का एवरेज 1 से बढ़ेगा. यानी दिस गाय शुड हैव 40 एक्स्ट्रा, विच मेक श्योर that the average of the entire groups goes up by 1, because all the 40 students will get 1 each, is what we can roughly understand when it comes to average. So you should have 40 extra, and 24 तो basic criteria होना ही चाहिए to enter the group. So 24 plus 40 gives you 64. Same answer, less hassle but more brains. So there is always going to be that trade-off. Learn these kinds of things which makes your life easier and simpler. That's the suggestion. So that's your 4th question. Now let's think about the 5th one, which says the average age of the group decreased by 3 years when a guy who is 56 years old is replaced by another 20 years old, and how this average age would have changed if he was replaced by 2 people of 32 years old each, basically. Now here the thing is, one very simple funda you have to remember. The first part, the average decreased by 3 when 56 years old guy was replaced by one guy who is 20 years old. That is, one is going, one is coming, and that is okay. But the second scenario, where the same 56 years old is getting replaced by 2 people of 32 each, that is, one is going out and 2 are coming in, that is something which is not okay, and hence straight away your answer becomes cannot be determined, because one simple thumb rule you should remember: number of people at the exchange should remain same. 1 should go, 1 should come. 2 should go, 2 should come. It cannot be possible that 1 goes and 2 comes back. That is not permissible at all. So simply, if you want to just remember this thought, so you don't even have to solve. These are your 5-10 second shortcuts basically. Let's say you want to know why this happens. So let's take an example. Let's assume that the average is A apparently, and now we know that 56 years old वाला चला गया था, एंड उसके बदले 20 वाला एक आ गया, यानी 36 का डिफरेंस हो गया, एंड ग्रुप का एवरेज 3 से कम हो गया, तो सबका वैल्यू 3 से कम हो गया, यानी टोटल 12 लोग होने चाहिए अपने ग्रुप में बेसिकली, इज व्हाट वी आर सेइंग. सो अज्यूमिंग एवरेज इज ए, एंड इमेजिन द फर्स्ट सिनेरियो कि 32 वाले 2 आ गए, उसके बदले 64 वाला ही एक आ गया, तो क्या होता? 12A वुड हैव बीन द सम, बिकॉज एवरेज को नंबर ऑफ लोगों के साथ मल्टीप्लाई किया तो सम मिलता है. 56 वाला एक चला गया, 64 वाले 2 आ गए. सो अगर 2 आ गए तो 13 लोग हो गए अब, बिकॉज 12 थे, एक चला गया 56 वाला, 11 हो गए. 32 वाले 2 आ गए तो 13 लोग हो गए अब. लेट्स डू दिस उल्टा. लेट्स से 56 वाला एक गया और उसके बदले 64 वाला ही एक आ गया, तो अभी भी लोग जो है वो 12 ही रहेंगे, वो चेंज नहीं होगा. एंड नाउ व्हेन यू ट्राई एंड सॉल्व दिस, बेसिकली व्हाट हैपेंस इज 12 गेट्स ऑफ. सो यू कैन से दैट द एवरेज, ये अगर हो गया तो एवरेज इज गोइंग टू इंक्रीज बाय 8/12, दैट इज 2/3. एवरेज 2/3 से बढ़ जाएगा जो पुराना एवरेज था उससे. सो यू कैन कमेंट कंक्लूसिवली व्हेन द नंबर ऑफ पीपल इज सेम, 1 goes 1 comes in, 2 goes 2 comes in. But here in this case what has happened? 1 goes in, 1 goes out, sorry, and 2 comes in of 32. The value is same, the change is same, which is 8 years in both the scenarios. But look at the problem, because the number of people are different, this cannot be cancelled and you cannot further solve this anymore. So mathematically also this is not possible. So that is the actual explanation why cannot be determined as the answer. But what you can do is you can just, this was just for your reference. If you are thinking this is too complicated, just don't remember about it. Just simply remember the fact that I've told you. 1 should go out, 1 should come in, 2 should go out, 2 should come in. 1 goes out, 2 comes in, not possible. Number of people at the exchange should remain same. That is your main core funda, which is what you need to understand here in such type of questions. So that's your 5th one. Moving on, the 6th one, which says in a class of 120 people, 24 students have scored 73 marks, 42 students have scored 68 marks, and the remaining students have scored 78 marks. What is the average marks? So again we can use weighted average. So pehle to we'll have to find out the remaining students, which is going to be 54. And again here if you see, the numbers are very big numbers. So we cannot, rather we should not solve this way. We need to think of method of assumed mean, that I think we saw in question number 3 or something, if you remember. So method of assumed mean is what we are going to do, and let's see what happens then. So when we apply method of assumed mean here, what we'll need to do is we'll have to assume a value of average, and our range is 73, 68 and 78. That means 68 to 78 is my range. So I can assume any damn number between 68 and 78. To make life simple, let's assume one of the given numbers only. So let's say assume 73 only, which makes things very easy. So let's do the deviation now. तो 73 का 73 के साथ डिविएशन 0 हो जाएगा, 68 के साथ -5 हो जाएगा, 78 के साथ +5 हो जाएगा. Let's do that calculation also. So 24 into 0 is 0 only. 42 5s are -210 and 54 5s are, so 250 plus 20, that is going to be 260. So -210 plus 260, 270, 250 plus 20, 270. So -210 plus 270 gives you +60, divided by 24 plus 42 plus 154, that is 120, you already know, which is half. And because this is positive, we should add in the assumed value. So 73 plus half gives you 73.5 as your answer. Now again, remember, if you would have done this, you would have gone bonkers figuring out 73.5 with these big numbers. So don't do that. Use method of assumed mean. So you've learned something better, use that when it comes to the calculation. That is the whole deal, right? We have been following. So this is your 6th question. Let's do the next one. Now these few are going to be interesting word problems, which are going to make things slightly confusing, but we'll have to hold it together. So starting with the 7th one, which says the profits of a company grew 3 times in 2010 over the previous year, then 6 times in 2011 and 12 times in 2012. Then on an average, how many times the profits have grown every year? So one mistake that normally happens is that student, because they are asking on average, the student will simply add the numbers, that is 3, 6 and 12, and divide by 3. When you do that, I think you get answer as 7, which is there also, but which is incorrect, which is answer option 2. Now, what should be the correct philosophy? So let's assume the numbers. Let's assume that the original data, that 2010 में whatever was the profit in the previous year, that is apparently 2009, उसका 3 times बन गया. Just for the simplicity purpose, I am assuming the number to be 10 rupees profit in 2009. So 2010 में 3 times बन गया, यानी 30 rupees हो गया. 2011 में उसका 6 times बन गया, यानी 30 का 6 times बन गया, which is 180 rupees. And 2012 में उसका 12 times बन गया, which is going to be 180 का 12 times, which is 2160 rupees. This is the original numbers. These are the original data points. What they said is, if you do this average, simple average, that is arithmetic mean, add all, divide by number of values, you get 7 times. So you are saying, forget all of this, 3 times, 6 times, 12 times, Flat 7 times every year the profit should grow. Let's verify with the numbers. And when you do that, assuming 10 rupees as the profit in 2009, so 70 in the 2010, then 490 in 2011, and then 3430 in 2012. So clearly you have overshot your original number. So 7 times is not the right answer. This is how you come to know with the detailed screening. But then obviously in exam you will not be able to find that out. So there is a simple clue. Most of the times this happens that you get simple clues to find out such answers. But for that you have to read the question very carefully and understand what is happening. So if I read that question one more time very, very carefully, which says the profits of the company grew 3 times in this, 6 times in this, 12 times in this, and so on and so forth. This simple word times means which operation do you perform. So if you have learned this in school, you can easily say times is normally multiplication is what we do as an operation. So if you remember, we have 3 means: arithmetic, geometric, and harmonic mean. In which of the 3 means we have multiplication? And again you will find out a very simple answer, that is, it is the geometric mean. So geometric mean is the only mean where we have multiplication. So this is the smallest thing, that you should not have done arithmetic mean, you should have done rather geometric mean of 3, 6 and 12. See, because they will never say which mean, they will always say on an average, because average means mean, but which mean is the point that you need to figure out. So one, you need a lot of practice, and so you have that intuition, kicking in the back of your head that maybe this is not right, maybe this is right, this is what should be the steps, and so on and so forth. And one way is you figure out in this manner also, and both are required. So you have to practice also, because sometimes such clues are also not there openly, so you'll have to have those practice exercise. So geometric mean of 3, 6, 12, you know the formula, multiply all 3 and then divide by, you have to take the cube root basically. You are not going to divide, you are going to take the cube root. So 3 into 6 is 18, 18 into 12 is 216, 216 is 6 ka cube straight away. So answer should have been 6 times instead of 7 times, which is the correct answer. Again let's verify with the numbers. The 10 rupees is the profit. Every year it is going to become 6 times. Flat is what we are saying. So 10 becomes 60, 60 becomes 360, and 360 becomes 2160, which is what also the original numbers were saying us. So same answer, same logic. So answer is your 6 times instead of 7 times. So that is your question number 7 basically. Let's do the 8th one, which says a person invests 6,000 rupees every day in buying stocks of a single company on 3 consecutive days. The price of stocks on these 3 days was 120 rupees, 200 rupees and 300 rupees respectively. What is his average price per day, basically per share basically? So here again, if you do average of 120, 200 and 300, you will get a wrong answer. So you should not be doing this. How do I would have solved this question is not thinking anything technical, but a very basic simple framework of averages. That is, let's imagine I have this money 6,000 rupees every day for 3 days. So total I am going to invest 18,000 rupees basically. And how do I got that? So 6,000 into 3. That's my total amount. But every day the price is different. So I will be getting different number of shares. So this is what I need to track. On day 1, my price is 120 rupees. So I'm gonna get 50 shares because 12 5s are 60. Day 2, price is 200. So I'm gonna get 30 shares. 2 3s are 6. Day 3, price is 300. So I'm gonna get only 20 shares on day 3. Right? If I add all these 3, that is going to be my number of shares, which is going to be 100 shares that I have purchased over the 3-day period, and total I have invested 18,000. So 18,000 is my investment. I have 100 shares, 50 plus 30 plus 20. I think answer is 180 rupees as my average price of the stock, which is answer option Answer option 4. I would have done this and not thought about any other means or anything, the technicality, whether it is arithmetic mean or geometric mean or harmonic mean, etc., etc. But how do you come to know, or rather what is the framework? So very, very simple framework again. So geometric mean times or something like that will be there, multiplication you will understand. This is basically a case of harmonic mean. Now how do we understand that, or how we can remember this? So simple framework, if things are inversely proportional, there is a high chance that harmonic mean is always in the picture. And here things are inversely proportional in the sense that the total investment on every day is constant, 6,000 rupees. But the share prices on 3 days are different. Now depending on the share price, the number of shares will keep varying if you invest a fixed amount every day. So just say for example, if the price is 120, you got the most number of shares because the price was least, which is 120. When the price is okay 200, you got slightly less shares because price has increased. And when the price shot up to 300, you got even lesser number of shares. So as the price is going up, number of shares are going down if your total investment is same. So that is, things are inversely proportional. So you should have done harmonic mean as the thought process. So remember this for the questions. How do you identify? So we'll have to do harmonic mean of 120, 200 and 300, and that is going to give you the correct answer. So harmonic mean का formula अपने को पता है. So 3 upon 1 upon 20 plus 1 upon 200 plus 1 upon 300. After all the simplification, you get the answer as 180 rupees basically. So average price would have been that, answer option 4 as we discussed earlier. So that's your 8th question, folks. Only 2 are remaining now. Let's do them very quickly, and they are very good questions. So starting with the 9th one, which says the product of n positive real numbers is unity. Now very important, this word unity. Unity is unit, which is basically 1. Okay. So product multiplication is 1. Then their sum is necessarily dash. So for this question, you have to remember a relationship that we have told you in the last part of the concept, that is the relationship between the two means, that is arithmetic mean, geometric mean and harmonic mean. Now what is that relation? So arithmetic mean is greater than or equal to geometric mean. Let's apply that formula. So arithmetic mean is add all the numbers, divide by total numbers. Geometric mean is this, which is nth root of n1, n2, n3, n3 and so on and so forth. If you remember the data, they said product of n numbers is unity. So this product is 1 actually. And now 1 का कोई भी अगर रूट ले ले तो obviously उसका आंसर तो 1 ही रहेगा. तो right side everything is sorted and it is 1 only. So now what happens is, from the left side this नीचे वाला n goes there and gets multiplied with that 1, and obviously 1 into n is n. So the sum you will see is greater than or equal to n basically. Now looking at this relation, we have to mark the answers, and some of the answers are tricky options. So you have to choose the best one. So the best answer is the sum is never less than n. Why never less than n? Because when we say never less than n, this means n से या तो बड़ा हो सकता है या equal हो सकता है, but n से छोटा नहीं हो सकता. Whereas some of the answer options were saying that equal to n हो सकता है, possible है, not entirely wrong. One more answer would be there probably which says always greater than n. क्या ये always greater than n है क्या? नहीं, तो वो always word की वजह से वो option नहीं आएगा. So this seems the right option which considers all the scenarios, all the situations. So that is the best answer, and this is how you need to figure that out basically. So that's your 9th question. Coming to the 10th one, which says 40 consecutive natural numbers are written and one of the numbers is erased. The average of remaining 39 numbers is 45, which is the number that is erased. Now the problem here is whether we are erasing a smaller number or a bigger number is something that we do not know. And even before we proceed with that thought process, first we need to understand one property related to the even number of terms. So there is one simple property that you need to remember that 1 to 40, the average if you calculate, it is 20.5. Why 20.5? So I will explain you a simple property. Let's do 1 to 10 ka sum. And if you want to find out the average, we'll have to divide by 10. 1 to 10 का जो सम होता है 10 into 11 upon 2 यानी 55 होता है. 55 divided by 10 करोगे तो it will be 5.6 basically. Now similarly 1 to 20 का अगर सम हम करने जाए, उसका सम पहले निकाल लेते हैं. 20 into 21 upon 2 तो हो जाएगा 210 हो जाएगा. एंड 21 डिवाइड बाय 2 करेंगे तो 10.5 आएगा. सॉरी, दिस इज 5.5 नॉट 5.6. 55 डिवाइड बाय 10. सो व्हाट इज द प्रॉपर्टी? एंड वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट, यू शुड रिमेंबर, जो भी सारे इवन नंबर्स है उनका अगर तुम सम एवरेज निकालते हो, सॉरी, तो वो एवरेज हमेशा 0.5 में एंड होता है. फॉर ऑल द इवन नंबर्स द एवरेज always ends in 0.5. This is what you need to remember. If your total number of terms are even numbers like 10 numbers, 20 numbers, 30 numbers and so on and so forth, उनके लिए. So this is the property that you need to remember. So same way, the average of 40 natural numbers or even natural numbers ends in 0.5. basically. Now as I said, if you erase a smaller number, then obviously average increases, but if you erase a bigger number, then average decreases. So remaining 39 numbers, the average was 45. If there will be 40 numbers, the average will be ending in 0.5 as we discussed right now, because there will be even numbers. So average can be either 44.5 or 45.5 depending on which number you are erasing. So the deviation is 0.5 and that deviation is happening for remaining 39 numbers because of that one number that we are erasing. So 39 should be multiplied with 0.5 because 0.5 ka deviation is happening for all the 39 numbers. So that gives us 19.5. So the number is either 19.5 less or 19.5 more than whatever the average is basically. So if you subtract 44.5 minus 19.5, you get 25 as the number, or if you add 45.5 plus 19.5, you get 65 as the number. So the number can be both either 25 or 65 depending on which number you are erasing. So if it would have been 25, so if you have erased the smaller number, the average after erasing would have increased by 0.5. And if you have erased the bigger number, the average would have decreased by 0.5. So that is that property. So hence both answers are possible. Both answer options 1 and 2 are possible. So hence we'll mark answer option 3 as the correct answer. Very, very good question. Such questions are something that you should always look forward when it comes to the solving part. So folks, this is about average. Go through this one more time. Each and every question, try and solve these ones on your own. If you still have any questions, any queries, do let us know. We'll be very happy to help you guys. So have a great day. Thank you so much. Hope to see you in the next class. Bye bye.